Good evening, this is BrassTacks and we're starting off with some breaking news. Union Minister Narayan Rane, who was arrested earlier today for his remarks about quote-unquote wanting to slap the Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray, he's now being produced before a court right now. Meanwhile, Uddhav Thackeray is in a huddle with his top ministers to take stock of the developments. Most likely, Mr. Narayan Rane, the first central minister to be under arrest in over 20 years, will likely spend the night in a lockup. Remember, his anticipatory bail was rejected by the Bombay High Court. The court had also rejected any kind of expeditious hearing of his matter. Now he will be produced in court and will likely spend the night in lockup. Vinaya has more details on this. Vinaya, extraordinary events playing out over the course of the last 6 to 8 hours or so with the arrest of Narayan Rane now. What is the latest that you can share with us, both in terms of what's happening in Raigad and also what the Chief Minister is up to right now?
Work in the night itself to see to it that Narayan Rane, when he's produced in the court tonight itself, whatever the hearing be, whether there will be some relief or no relief, that we should come to know by tonight. So the BJP leaders tell us that it may not be till tomorrow morning, that we may have to wait for Narayan Rane to be produced in the local court, and that production may happen tonight itself. That is something that we are keeping a close watch on. Secondly, a crucial meeting is on at Varsha, because remember, this was an unexpected turn of events. Yesterday, after Narayan Rane gave that statement, and today morning when he asked the media about who was the Shiv Sena and that he wasn't any ordinary person to be arrested just like that, within hours we have seen the Maharashtra Vikas Aghadi swing into action and arrest a sitting union minister. Right now, the chief minister, along with the top ministers of the Maharashtra Vikas Aghadi, are taking stock of the situation in Varsha at Malabar Hill, which is the official residence of the chief minister. The Maharashtra Vikas Aghadi is likely to decide the future strategy about how to handle this ahead with the arrest of Narayan Rane, though the Shiv Sena feels that the matter is over for them, and the government is also in some sense prepared to hear that he may get bail sooner or later. So tonight, while we wait to see if Narayan Rane will be produced in Mahad Court itself, tomorrow the Bombay High Court is likely to hear his petition seeking quashing of the 3 FIRs that have already been registered. Today, that petition was not heard by the Bombay High Court because of technical issues. Narayan Rane's anticipatory bail application was also rejected by the Ratnagiri Court.
Vinaya, what is the justification though? What is the justification? What is the rationale that the government is giving for what may easily pass off as pretty high-handed behavior? After all, Mr. Rane did not, indulge in any kind of physical violence. He did not beat up people. I don't think what he said can be even characterized as incitement to any kind of act of violence. For a political statement that he made against the chief minister to arrest a sitting union minister, what is the rationale? What is the justification?
Well, as of now, the Shiv Sena sources tell us that this was just to prove the point that everybody is same in front of the law, and this was especially after Narayan Rane asked the media and said that he was no ordinary person, that he could be touched, and that, it was who was the Shiv Sena to touch him. He was a sitting union minister. So clearly, after yesterday's statement, and remember, yesterday's statement does not come in isolation, Zakka. We know that there is bad blood between Narayan Rane as well as the Shiv Sena. In fact, the Shiv Sena has hush-hush murmurs that is the only qualification for which Narayan Rane was inducted into the BJP cadres. And after a sling of statements against the Shiv Sena, yesterday's statement was the last straw, is what the Shiv Sena leaders tell us.
All right, Vinaya, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much, Vinaya Deshpande, our Mumbai Bureau Chief, with the latest on this saga of Narayan Rane, the first sitting union minister to the government of India, being arrested by a state police in more than 20 years now. The last happened when Murali Maran and T.R. Balu were arrested in that midnight arrest drama in which Karunanidhi was also arrested by the Jayalalitha government. That happened in 2001. Meanwhile, the arrested Union Minister Narayan Rane spoke exclusively to CNN News 18 while he was on way from Ratnagiri to Raigad, where, of course, he's being produced in a court of law. Like Vinaya was saying, he will most likely spend the night in a police lockup. Listen to what Mr. Rane had to tell CNN News 18.
ये जो आपको लगता है ये जो आपने जो बयान दिया था वो आप अवॉइड कर सकते थे, ये रिग्रेटेबल है इस तरह का बयान कोई भी स्टेट के चीफ मिनिस्टर को, या क्या आप इतने बड़े नेता हैं, आपको इस तरह का बयान देना चाहिए था? आपको क्या लगता है?
अरे क्या बयान दिया मैं? आप देखा क्या? मैं ऐसा कहा उस दिन में होता वो घटना के टाइम जब हमारे सीएम को देश का आजादी का कितने साल हुए जानकारी नहीं, तभी उनको थप्पड़ मारता था। ऐसा कहा अभी नहीं कि जब उस वक्त होता तो उसमें क्राइम कितना बनता है।
सर आपको लगता है ये रिग्रेटेबल है, आपको ये नहीं बोलना चाहिए था?
ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, उन लोग से ऐसा बनता है कि थोड़ा तोड़ देंगे और तोड़ देंगे। सीएम खुद बोलता है, उसको शोभा देता है क्या? जब हमारे लाड साहब ने वो जो शिवसेना भवन तोड़ने का कुछ भाषा किया तो इन्होंने बोला हमें सब सैनिकों का जाके उसका थोड़ा तोड़ दो, ये उसको अच्छा लगता है क्या?
All right, we'll have more developments through the night on the Rane saga. Meanwhile, let's shift focus to the big story, and that is, of course, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. And the G7 has just met, the first meeting since the Taliban takeover, to discuss this pressing issue. Remember, the Taliban have now given a deadline of August the 31st for all American troops to exit. Just pause for a moment and think about that. The world's only superpower is being given a deadline to leave by a guerrilla army. And what is even worse is that there is now a Pakistani leader, a senior leader of the ruling party, the PTI, who says on record that now that the Taliban has done what they were meant to in Afghanistan, they will now be used to target Kashmir. All right, before we go to our guests, we're just getting in a piece of breaking news, and this is quite the contrast of stories, as it were, because just a couple of hours ago, we had the Taliban responding to the United States and saying August the 31st is going to be the deadline. Every single remaining American soldier and everybody that America wants to evacuate has to be done so by the 31st of August. Now, within just the last few moments, we have heard from the US President Joe Biden, who has agreed to that August 31st deadline. Mind you, America still has a few thousand people left to evacuate, not just their own, diplomatic staff and other people who were there at the embassy and helping with the American troops and American personnel, but also Afghan nationals who are important enough for America to take out of Kabul before that deadline. In fact, the indication that we were getting from the US administration just up until 24 hours ago was that they may breach that August 31st deadline. It may not be possible to evacuate everybody by the 31st of August. But look at this. A ragtag guerrilla army warning the world's only superpower to evacuate and leave from that country in the next 5 to 6 days, and America agrees. Supposedly the most powerful man in the world agrees to stick to that deadline. That's where things stand as of right now. Praveen Swami, Group Consulting Editor, Network 18, is joining us. Aparajita Sarangi is Member of Parliament and spokesperson of the BJP. Raja Kaiser Ahmed is a foreign affairs expert joining us from Pakistan. And Professor Scott Lucas is international affairs expert and emeritus professor for politics at the University of Birmingham. Praveen, I'll start with you. I mean, this is just mind-boggling. I mean, for our viewers, just to be able to wrap our heads around the fact that at 7:30 India time, we had the Taliban saying the US better stick to the August 31st deadline. And just now, within the last few moments, we have heard from the White House, from President Joe Biden, that he intends to stick to that August 31st deadline. It's amazing. I mean, why is America, the world's biggest, greatest superpower, seemingly not just in a hurry, but in this case, it seems like, they are listening to every word of the Taliban.
I think the simple answer to that question is that the United States quite some time ago came to the determination that Afghanistan just isn't worth it for their national interests. They believe that rightly or wrongly believe that their counterterrorism interests can be secured through other means without an expensive ground presence. And they're perfectly happy for regional states like China, Russia, and Iran, as well as, of course, Pakistan, to pick up the tab for the chaos that is likely to follow. Having come to that determination, quite honestly, I don't believe the United States is particularly concerned with the fate of a few hundred or a few thousand people who are left behind. It will do its best to evacuate its citizens and probably succeed. Many Afghans, of course, who worked with American authorities will not or may not have time to get out, and they will suffer the consequences.
Okay.
But geopolitics is an ugly place, and President Biden clearly, in my view, misguidedly, but clearly, simply doesn't seem to believe that it's worth American dollars and the potential risk to American lives to drag this out by a few more days.
No, it's amazing to me because the Taliban had given a deadline, I think even on May 1, that saying that all American troops have to leave. And I think that was the original deadline that was set even in the Trump deal. But that deadline did not happen. I mean, that deadline got breached. But somehow, the events of the last 2 weeks, I'm sorry to say, make it appear that the world's biggest superpower is bending over backwards to accommodate the whims and fancies of a ragtag motley group, a guerrilla army. But let me ask Professor Scott Lucas that. Surely there must be some leverage that America has. I mean, it can't be that the Taliban is dictating terms and America is listening to those terms.
Well, first of all, there's a couple of sort of caveats to that statement that you've just mentioned from the White House. First of all, it didn't come from President Biden himself. He's still in a meeting with the G7 leaders. It came from a senior administration official. Secondly, it's not a final decision because the official said that Biden has asked for contingency plans in case he decides between now and the 31st to stay longer. So he could still change his mind, is what the White House is saying. But your general point remains. Before the Taliban went into Kabul, the United States officials met with them, and there was an agreement that when the Taliban came in, they do not touch the embassies, and they allow the evacuation to take place. And it appears that August 31st was set as the target date to complete this. Now, even though not all Americans, let alone Afghans who work with them, are out of the country, the Taliban are putting their foot down and saying, that's it. And their leverage, the Taliban, is they could threaten that airport. You can threaten that airport and effectively shut it down by threatening, for example, to attack the runways. So the Americans now are caught in this game of chicken with the Taliban as to how far they push back, to the extent that the CIA chief, William Burns, was in Kabul yesterday to meet with the Taliban head, Mullah Baradar.
Yeah.
The issue here is that the Americans can be, quote, a superpower, as you put it. But once you withdraw your military from almost all of Afghanistan except that airport, you have given up your leverage. And countries like Pakistan, who are next door, countries like Iran, who are next door, are a lot closer than the United States. And the United States doesn't have the military forces now in Afghanistan, and it does not have the political links that regional countries do, which is why it's appearing weak.
Okay, I want to, since Professor Lucas mentioned Pakistan, I want to play out a small soundbite of a lady named Neelam Shah Qadri. She's a senior leader in the ruling party in Pakistan of the PTI, and I'll get Aparajita Sarangi as well as Raja Kaisar Ahmed to respond to this. Here is a ruling party member openly on national television in Pakistan saying, yes, Taliban are now done with what they needed to do in Afghanistan. Their next stop is going to be Kashmir. Let me just play that out, 30 seconds, and then I'll come to Aparajita Sarangi.
ग्रीन पासपोर्ट की इज्जत शुरू हो गई है। पाकिस्तान में इन्वेस्टर्स आ रहे हैं, ओवरसीज रिमिटेंसेस आ रही हैं, रेवेन्यू इतना जनरेट हो रहा है। पूरी दुनिया में पाकिस्तान का टॉप पे नाम है। टर्किश गवर्नमेंट देख लें, मलेशियन गवर्नमेंट देख लें, अफगानिस्तान माशाल्लाह से देख लें, वो तालिबान हमें कहते हैं हम आपके साथ हैं और इंशाल्लाह वो आके हमारे साथ कश्मीर फतह करके देंगे.
आगे कश्मीर हमारे लिए छीन लेंगे. I mean, are we going to let this go, Aparajita Sarangi? Yes, you know, the ties between the Pakistani army, the ISI and the Taliban is well known. But this whole thing that now these fighters will be used or these terrorists will be used in Kashmir, surely that should be of concern to the government of India.
I would say certainly it is. The other day when I spoke to you, I started with the biblical statement, and I would still repeat the same. Lord, I do not want to see the distant scene. One step is enough for me. I think this is not only true for India, but also true for America and all the countries who are interested in getting their people back to their own countries. We need to have all the foreign nationals and the Afghans who are desirous of coming out of Afghanistan. This is our first and major step, and this is the biggest concern for all of us. As far as India is concerned, we are all well aware of the fact that 590 people have been brought out and 500 approximately are still there. And I'm sure this is the concern of America too. 6,000 troops at the Kabul airport handling the chaotic situation, and so many number within Afghanistan who have to be brought out. And I'm sure this is the concern of all the other countries. We were actually waiting with bated breath for the outcome of the G7 meeting, and here it comes.
No, but they've decided nothing but to stick to the Taliban's deadline.
So
that's what they've decided. That's what they've decided. They've said, okay, the Taliban is setting the terms, we'll listen to the terms.
This is extremely unfortunate. That's it. So this is extremely unfortunate. It's by bowing down to the whims and caprices of the Taliban regime. And after having put in about more than $3 billion for so many number of years, ultimately America had to bow down. We were all looking at the decision of Joe Biden. We thought he would come up with something, some kind of assurance for all of us. Because I fail to understand how within 7 days' time, all people who are desirous of coming out would be safely, with full security, be brought out.
But Raja Kaisar, I want you to respond to the question that I asked about this Pakistani leader. Yes, it's one thing to say this in hush-hush circles. It's an open secret that there are deep connections between Rawalpindi and the Taliban. But for a sitting member of the ruling party to say this on TV, that they have done with Afghanistan, now they will come to Kashmir, what does that even mean? You're on mute, Mr. Kaisar. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah. You are now, yes.
You are now, yes.
Okay. Let me put the facts right. One, she is not a senior member of the ruling party. Secondly, she does not represent government of Pakistan in any capacity. Neither is this the official policy of the government of Pakistan. Nor anyone nor any sane voice would trumpet or clarion for Taliban intervention in Kashmir. Kashmir has its own niceties, it has its own intricacies, it has an indigenous resistance movement, and I don't think that it needs support from any of the neighboring countries. So I would consider this argument of the lady who you referred as a preposterous argument.
No, but what does your Prime Minister mean? And I'm surely you heard this last week. What does your Prime Minister mean by Afghans have just broken the shackles of slavery? Surely if they're going to be enslaved to anyone, they're going to be enslaved to the Taliban.
One, we need to understand in which context he has uttered this statement. One thing, Taliban are now a ground reality. Even you are just in your prelude, you are referring to the United States of America, who is bowing down to the demands of Taliban for the evacuation in just mere 5 to 7 days. So it in itself tells that ground reality in Afghanistan has considerably changed, and it has led to an upside down, and all the regional countries will have to reorientate their policies accordingly. Because
I don't know about Pakistan and what its policy will be, but surely I don't see the government of India recognizing or having any kind of formal diplomatic ties with a rogue regime. And for that matter, any a Western democracy or a country that believes in the rule of law.
Yeah, that would be definitely the decision of the Indian government. But as far as the student and the reader of international politics, I know that you cannot remain oblivious to what is happening in your neighborhood. So India will have to evoke a policy towards Taliban sooner or later. So they will have to respond to the challenges which are emanating from Afghanistan.
Okay.
They will have to, make some substantive roadmap as far as all the developments they are concerned.
So let's be very clear about this. Let's be very clear about this. The linkages between the ISI and the Taliban are very well known for even an academic like you to simply brush aside. It's not. Those linkages are very much there, and I'm sure in the official power structures, both in Pindi and Islamabad, they are smiling from year to year with the arrival of the Taliban. They somehow feel that they can control the Taliban, or the Taliban will do their bidding. But that doesn't mean that countries around the world should recognize and have diplomatic ties with a rogue regime, a regime that does not believe in human rights, that does not believe in women being in the public sphere, that does not believe or accept any other form of religion or minorities. I mean, why? Why should any country recognize such a regime and have official ties with it?
Okay. Your point and your argument. I know, since the reality in international politics is quite subjective, but I must say that the countries in the neighborhood like Turkey, Iran, Russia, and even countries like United States of America, they are into negotiation with Taliban for long. It's not just Pakistan. As I said, that a country cannot remain oblivious of what is happening in its neighborhood.
No, you're repeating that point again and again, Mr. Kesar. But let me go back to Praveen and ask him, and I've got the last couple of minutes on this. Yes, I'll agree with Mr. Kesar to the extent that this is a very difficult choice for India. But I don't see, and I want to know what your thoughts are, whether you see India establishing, some kind of formal contact with the Taliban, some kind of formal relationship with the Taliban. We did not recognize the Taliban between 1996 and 2001, and I fail to understand why the situation should be any different now.
So here's what we do know. The first thing is the world is not exactly queuing up to recognize the Taliban regime. There's a lot of skepticism in many capitals across the world about this. And I think India will, like many others, wait and watch to see what the Taliban actually does in Afghanistan, as opposed to what it's saying for the cameras as long as they're there. The second thing is India has some unique security concerns also. We know that under the Taliban umbrella, various jihadist groups with close links to Pakistan's ISI, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, others have been training. We had Indian nationals being trained to engage in suicide attacks and terrorist attacks. And India will be watching very closely to see whether these promises the Taliban has made about acting against terror, whether these apply to India as well, or whether it's going to allow the ISI leverage in space to pursue the agenda it's long had in Kashmir.
Okay.
We'll get an answer to those questions soon enough. But I don't think there is going to be any great haste to be in India, to be at the head of that recognition queue, as it were, if and when that queue does form. Russia, fine. Iran, fine. Not India.
Aparajita Sarangi, countries around the world, whether it's the US or UK, they can decide what they want to do with vis-a-vis the Taliban. The unfortunate reality for us is we happen to be in the same region. And there are serious security questions, as Praveen laid out. There are serious infrastructure questions. I mean, if we are going to vacate the field and make it an open field for the Chinese and the Turks and the Russians to some extent, then we also need to shore up some very difficult questions when it comes to the investments that we've made in Chabahar, the North-South corridor. Surely we need to expedite those if we're not going to get land connectivity through what is considered to be a hostile country, a hostile regime.
These issues are certainly there. We are very closely monitoring the situation. The Cabinet Committee on Security, headed by the Honorable Prime Minister, has met a couple of times. And Mr. Jaishankar has also been in touch with the US Secretary of State and all his other counterparts. So I think we are looking at the situation very carefully. We would take the right decision, but I can only say that we would never support a government which has been set up by force, a military government by force, one. And number two, we have always been wanting a peaceful Afghanistan, an Afghanistan where there was a democratically elected government. We have always been supporting, and this is our principle. We are a principled nation. We go by certain ethics, but there are issues involved. There have been infrastructural projects, infrastructure development projects from India, and you know the kind of investment that we have made there. We are all have been talking about the Salma Dam and the construction of the Parliament building in Afghanistan, where we had put in a lot of money. So, but I think I can always say with a lot of confidence that we have had very good ties with the people of Afghanistan. Culturally, we have been together, and I think we would continue with that kind of relationship.
All right.
But right now, we just cannot say what would it look like, what would be our approach. I think it is very early to say. Let's wait and watch.
No, fair enough. But we'll have to make those hard choices over the next few weeks and months. For now, I will round off with the story that we broke at the top, and I find this amazing. It in a sense captures this whole Taliban story. 2 hours ago, we had the Taliban come out in a press conference and say that August the 31st is the deadline for American troops to leave. And just moments before the show began, we had information that the White House has decided that they will stick to the August 31st deadline. Whoever can make through before that, so be it. Good for them. If they can't, then too bad. Tough luck. That's the reality of this story. That's the reality of where we stand. A superpower listening to the terms set by a guerrilla army and saying, okay, we'll abide by that. That's a wrap. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.